And joining me right now here on the Anidjar and Levine Accident Attorney Studios is my good friend there in Orlando with the Orlando Sentinel, who covers UCF better than anyone in the business. He is Matt Murschel. Matt, how you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing well. I'm going to admit, it's the first week of season. We're getting ready. I spent all weekend watching college football. I'm ready to go. I don't know about you, but I'm ready for this season to kick off. Let's get this thing going.
Well, we learned late last week that UCF named a starting quarterback. So let's start there for the people who don't know. Who is
Well,
the starting?
it's not official yet. It's not official yet.
I
It's
thought
not.
it was.
No, it's not official yet. UCF has not made that official. That it was reported last week that Cam Fancher was going to be the starting quarterback. It's felt like that's kind of the way it was going to trend towards. We're going to talk to Scott Frost, Monday, get a chance to sit down with him. It's probably more than likely going to be Cam Fancher, but until we get it officially, done, it's kind of the worst kept secret, I guess, so to speak, when it comes to UCF. But also it's been 8 months in the making of trying to figure out who is going to be the starting quarterback of this team.
Okay, so unofficially, why would he be the starting quarterback for this team in your eyes?
Well, I think you look at his experience. The guy's been around for a while. He's a redshirt senior. He started 28 plus games during his career. He played at Marshall. He played at FAU. I think he started 9 games last year for the Owls. He's got plenty of experience. He's very similar. He's one of those guys, I think, that it maybe it's not going to impress you off the tape, but he could do some things with his legs. He could run the football. He's got a decent arm. I think the maturity that he's shown throughout this camp is something that maybe Scott Frost and his staff have kind of zoned in on, and they feel like he's the kind of guy that can step in. Now, I will preface all this that Scott Frost has said several times throughout this process that just because we name a starter for game 1 doesn't mean that guy's going to be the starter for game 2 and for game 3. I think what they're going to do is they're going to go week by week and kind of see where they're at. Cam Fancher could start this weekend against Jacksonville State, but let's forget that they've got a longer window leading up to the game 2 against North Carolina A&T. So maybe they'll see what happens. If Fancher plays really well, or whoever it is plays really well, maybe that person's going to be the starter. And then moving forward, you kind of decide, okay, maybe we're going to go with this guy will be the guy. But then they've got a bye week, and then then North Carolina comes in here to play. So they have 3 weeks really to kind of tweak and see who's going on, who's played well and who hasn't played well. And I'm also of the belief, Mark, that I don't think it's just going to be one guy. I think, you could see another quarterback come in certain scenarios, maybe at goal line, maybe inside the 20. Ja'Cory Brown would be a great, type of player for that, has mobility, can throw the ball, So I don't think this is necessarily one guy is the guy throughout the whole thing. I think they want to make sure they got whoever is the best fit for them.
Okay, this is the tough question, and maybe you'll get some of these answers in the opener coming up later this week. What is the identity of the offense? Do they want to run? Do they want to throw? What do they want? And I know it's okay if you don't have the official answer. But what do you know what I mean? What do you think they want to try to do under Scott Frost now?
Well, I think they want to go UCF fast. This is what they've talked about. It's going to look very similar to what they did in 2016 and 2017. They're going to run the ball. They're going to use the RPOs. They're going to do some run pass options. They're trying to mix things up a little bit. They want to get as many playmakers involved. They want to have explosive plays. They want to do all those kind of things that put the defense on its heels. This isn't going to necessarily be, okay, we're going to run the ball 40, 50 times a game. If they feel like they need to, they will. But if they're going to mix up the passing game, they're going to mix up the run game. They feel like they got a really solid running backs room. They feel like they got a lot of details. They got a lot of guys who could fill a lot of roles there. The biggest question marks, I think, on this team right now, until we see them play a game, are what about the wide receivers group, which, they're not experienced. A lot of them aren't. No one's had a catch from last season, a Division I catch from last season. So this is an unproven group. Who's going to be the guys that step up in that front? And then also your offensive line. Paul Rubelt is the only returning starter from last year. And they got a lot of guys who played time elsewhere, but how are they going to build that offensive line? Is that offensive line going to be able to handle that? No matter what, Scott Frost has said, we're going to go fast. But he also indicated, listen, we're not going to go as fast as we did last time, because he believes that if you go too fast, you wear your defense out. If you're scoring touchdowns left and right, you're going to wear that your own defense down because it's constantly on the field. So what he said was, we're going to mix things up a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised to see a little bit of, what the he spent times with the LA Rams, Frost did. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a little bit of maybe a pro aspect to this offense. But I definitely believe they're going to mix things up. They're going to mix it up. They're going to run. They're going to pass. They're going to do screens. They're going to do bubbles. They're going to do all sorts of stuff. I think this is going back to the day that we saw with Frost in 16 and 17, where, they want to see as many playmakers out on the field as possible getting the football. They're not going to be limited by who has it.
Is this going to be a game later this week where everyone in the stands at the bounce house should have a depth chart? Who's that? Who's 79? Who's 87? Is that what it needs to be, Matt?
Yeah, I think there are going to be a lot of fans who are going to have a lot of faces they weren't familiar with. But I think you're going to see some of these guys get the right. The nice thing about this game, Mark, is that, yes, it's, UCF is a 16.5 favorite in this game, but it's going to be a challenging game for them. This isn't going to be just some walkthrough where they score 40, 50 points and it's done by halftime. I think this could be a really challenging game. I think you're going to get a lot of first and second teamers out there playing, a lot of rotations. They're going to see how much they can do. They want to win this game, obviously, but they want to make sure they get the guys out there to figure out what's rotation is going to work best for them. Offensive line, defensive line, secondary, which guys really kind of can step up and make some of these plays. So, yeah, I would bring a roster, keep your roster when you walk into the stadium on Thursday.
We're with Matt Murschel-Orlando, Sentinel, talking UCF football. All right, you bring up the defense. What would you like to see on that side of the ball coming up later this week?
Well, I think what this defense needs to be is it needs to have an identity. We haven't seen an identity for a UCF defense in quite some time. This is a group you want to see players who step up and are big name, become household names on this defense. We just haven't had that, where it's like you feel like UCF needs a guy that can step up, and whether it's a linebacker, whether it's a Kelly Lawson, linebacker, whether it's, Phil Dunham in the secondary, or is it Nigel Kelly on the front line. They need to show some domination identity on this defense, and some of that comes with creating sacks, being disruptive in the backfield. Some of that comes with getting turnovers. If they can get a few turnovers early on, if they can flip the field quickly, if they could make, Jacksonville State really kind of feel like they're running in mud, I think that would be a huge win for UCF when it comes to their defense. I just feel like, over the last 3 or 4 years, there just hasn't been. Think about the 2017 team with Shaquem Griffin. He was a guy he was the face of that defense. And I don't think that UCF has had someone like that since then. It's been very hard for them to figure that out. And I think that's what they would like to see. Now, whether that's going to happen now this year or whether they're building towards it, I think that would be something that would be interesting to see, because this is a group that has a lot of faces and a lot of experience, a lot of depth. And I think this is going to be the strength of this team, at least for the first 3 or 4 games. That's going to be the thing that UCF's going to have to lean on, is its defense, until this offense can really kind of get going and get to the point that they could show it's steady and ready to go.
I watched some of that game Saturday. I know you did as well. Big 12 matchup in Dublin, which would have been awesome to go to, by the way. I know you're jealous. You wish you were there. When I watched those two teams play, that was some big boy football going back and forth. You had to pick up 4th downs, run the ball, stop the run. I kind of took out, like, can UCF compete in that type of football game? What did you take out of that football game as a Big 12 matchup?
Well, I think it's the same thing I've taken out for the first couple seasons that UCF has been in the Big 12, is they're going to have to learn to develop an offensive and defensive line. That's where these teams are. It's no coincidence that, Iowa State uses their offensive line well and pushes down the field and sets things up. And Kansas State has a great offensive line, a great defensive line. You saw that play out in that game. And I think that's one of the things that UCF over the last couple seasons has really struggled with, is that their offensive and defensive lines have not had that kind of, size, tenacity. I think they're getting there. I think this group is probably as better than it's been in a while. But again, they have to go on the field and prove it. You're going to have to go up against guys who are, 6'6", 320 pounds. You're going to have to go out there and try to be that elite player. I think it's fine if you're a little smaller on both sides when you're in the American, because you're not playing against that. But when you get to the Power 4 level, you're going to have to win the line of scrimmage. You have to win the line when it comes to the defensive side of things. That's where I think UCF has struggled over the last 2 or 3 years. So they're going to have to do that. That's what I saw on Saturday, is good teams have good lines and can work the ball up and down the field, whether it's running or protecting the quarterback or whatever. So I think that's where UCF really has to start to see its game get elevated. Can they develop those kind of players? Can they bring those type of players in? And if they've got those kind of players, I think that's the rate to find success.
Let's end with this with Matt Murschel. Scott Frost 2.0. That's what I've been calling him because that's what it feels like. Is there pressure on him in year one to have a competitive team win football games after what happened in Nebraska?
I don't know if there's pressure on him. I think he's got a little more of a leeway. I don't think he feels nearly as much pressure as he did in Nebraska here. I mean, listen, he's come in here. He told fans right from the start, we're not going to go 13-0. I mean, it's just not possible right now. I think the expectation talking with fans over the last few months is just, they would love to see be competitive. They would want to, if my ceiling for this team is 6 wins, if they can get to a bowl game, I think that would be outstanding for UCF. But if they get to 5, if they go 5-7, I don't think that's a bad season. I think it's just, you're going to have to take baby steps. It's a new staff. They brought in nearly 7 newcomers. They're just starting to get themselves under their feet under them when it comes to having the financial resources that most Big 12 teams have. Now they got the full share of media money. So I think things are starting to come into place. But, do I think fans, if they don't win 8 or 9 games, they're going to scream fire Scott Frost? No, I think they're going to give him a window. I think he's going to have 3 or 4 seasons. Now, so that being said, if they come out and only win 3 games this year, or, they go 3 games this year and 4 games next year, I think then you'll start seeing people going, okay, what's going on here? We're not seeing that type of success. But I think right now, I'll say this, Mark, the atmosphere around this program is a lot different than it's been in the last couple of years. The family atmosphere that the players have, the coaches have, this is much more that feels like that 2016 and 17 teams where football is fun for these guys. They're out there talking about how much fun they have. They know each other. They're doing this for each other. They're not just doing. I think that's the one thing that people tend to forget about Scott Frost is, yes, talk about the offenses. Yes, talk about how UCF fast. I think it's about building family atmosphere in this program. And I think this team didn't have that the last 2 years. I thought last year's team was just a bunch of guys playing football, like mercenary football. I got my check. I'm going to go out. I'm going to make my money, and then I'm going to be done. I think this team feels so much different. I feel like this team is so much more closer, and that's going to come in big when they start facing some adversity later on.
Great stuff. What can we check out with your coverage to get you ready for later this week if you're a UCF fan?
Yeah, you can go to OrlandoSentinel.com. We just uploaded. Our football special section came out this weekend. Uploaded a couple previews. I broke down UCF's football schedule. I did 5 burning questions for fans to looking at UCF right now. I did Big 12 preview, team by team preview, Big 12, 5 burning questions. And then today we're going to, we're at the opener, the week opener. I'm sure Scott Frost has some things to talk about, possibly maybe who the quarterback's going to be. That would be the best thing in the news, right? We can start actually writing about an actual quarterback and not who might be quarterback.
We'll find out. Matt, thank you so much for coming on, and good luck with your coverage this season for UCF football.
Thanks, Mark.